We docked where they wanted us, on the far end of the station, 15 kilometers from the central axis. It was deliberate. The spy's designers claimed it was equidistant for neutrality's sake. But the corridor ceilings were 2 meters too short for our stride. The air had the humidity of a corpse, and the walls pulsed with a soft violet glow like a funeral dressed in royalty. This wasn't a welcome. It was a warning wrapped in architecture. Our delegation said nothing on the maglev ride. 6 Terrans, dressed for diplomacy, trained for war. At the center, I sat quiet, posture straight, breathing slow. Diplomat, commander, field operative, choose the title. I had worn all 3. What mattered now was restraint. Lieutenant Caro leaned toward me, just enough to speak without moving lips. "Ma'am, still jamming us. Low band only. Steady pulse from their comms net." "They've been jamming us since Mars orbit," I said. "They want to make sure we notice." He nodded once and leaned back. The spire itself circled Tau Vallis, a dying red supergiant that bathed everything in deep scarlet. From orbit, the station looked like a cathedral impaled on a blade, elegant, impossible, grotesque. The Accord liked their monuments dramatic. As the maglev reached the central hub, I took in the alien guards. Threx, maybe. Tall, plated, expressionless. Their armor shimmered like obsidian caught in lightning. The Kilari ambassador was waiting, draped in cobalt robes and flanked by ceremonial aides. His neck fronds twitched at our approach. "Terran delegation," he rasped, voice like dried leaves. "Welcome to Straylight. Conduct yourselves accordingly." I stepped forward and offered a smile. Of course, we're excellent at behaving when everyone's watching. The walk to the summit hall felt like a parade staged on a battlefield. Every corridor was lined with banners representing 60 species, ordered by their seniority in the Accord. Ours wasn't there. It wouldn't be unless the vote passed, and even then, they'd probably hang it near the restrooms. The symbolism wasn't subtle. Guards stood at every turn, motionless, ceremonial, weapons holstered, eyes forward. But I knew their type. These weren't peacekeepers, they were showpieces. Their armor gleamed, their protocols were ancient, and their tactics were obsolete. Beautiful relics, soft targets. We passed a group of Villari, a species I trusted as far as I could launch them. Reptilian, quick, highly networked, and obsessed with order. They watched us through compound lenses, clicking quietly in their native tongue. One paused to stare at me longer than was polite. I didn't break eye contact, just a slow nod. He twitched and turned away. Lieutenant Caro spoke low through our neural mesh. "Envoys are watching corners. 2 suits have pulse sleeves charged, nothing aggressive." "Good," I replied. "Let's keep them bored." As we reached the hall's entrance, 2 Threx sentinels scanned us with a crystal prism. The arcanotech they used tingled across my bones. Old magic, buried in new metal. One heartbeat too long, then they stepped aside. Inside, the summit hall opened up like a planet's core. The ceiling arched 50 meters high, with light streams orbiting the central dais in slow arcs. Each delegation stood or floated in position, arranged by tradition rather than threat level. It looked holy. It felt like a tribunal. Every eye turned to us. I held my breath for a single beat, then stepped forward. "Ambassador Ilara Miles, Terran United Systems. We come in peace, with formal petition for Accord admission." They didn't clap, didn't speak, they just watched. Good, let 'em watch. The ceremony was bloated, long-winded invocations of peace, unity, shared legacy. The Kilari sang a 2-tone litany that made my jaw vibrate. The Takaran delegate floated mid-air in a meditative trance, humming psionic frequencies audible only through neural implants. They called it diplomacy. I called it a distraction. We were the last to speak, by design. The old guard went first. The Kolari warned about militarization trends. The Gelf muttered concerns over volatile colonization patterns. The Kolari outright called us a species built on combustion and conquest. All of them smiled while doing it. Elegant scorn laced with polite applause. Theatre. When our turn arrived, I stepped forward and let the silence build. No translators needed. We brought implants. Ours worked better than theirs anyway. We didn't inherit the stars, I began. We built our path from scrap and storms. We bled on vacuum decks, survived solar flares, and turned orbital debris into civilization. Our presence here isn't a request, it's proof. I let my gaze sweep across the dais. Most of them blinked too slowly to mask discomfort. Ambassador Ziltha of the Valari leaned forward, voice processed through his lattice. Some would argue carving through resistance is not the same as diplomacy. Your kind excels at destruction. I gave him the kind of smile that doesn't reach the eyes. That depends on what needs removing. He clicked his mandibles. Is that a threat? I held his gaze. Only if you're in the way. A soft, neural ping buzzed behind my eyes. Caro, phase red standing. Surveillance integrity stable. Drone net locked. Translation is, they're watching us, but not seeing us. I stepped back into formation. The next topic was announced. Our integration into the Accord's defense network. They expected us to fold. They had no idea we'd already slipped inside the walls. While the chamber droned on, I focused on the pattern behind the noise. The Accord wanted access to our fleet data, our jump signatures, and most laughably, our command AI cores. Mutual transparency, they called it. We called it opening your throat. Tanaka's neural flicker confirmed what I already suspected. She was already inside their data lattice, tracking every packet bouncing off the Accord's encrypted mesh. Our implants barely pulsed. No one noticed. They never did. I let my eyes drift toward the Valari delegation. Too quiet. Ziltha's aides had changed position. One was missing. Update, I sub-vocalized. Tanaka responded over the thread. Loss of signal. Terran diplomatic wing. Internal grid spoofed. External feed scrambled. Timeline irregular. My stomach went cold. I spoke without inflection. Phase red. Confirm and hold. Caro's posture shifted. So did the envoys. Our silent shadows, disguised as aides, each one a combat asset with diplomatic credentials and zero hesitation. Then Tanaka again, antimatter signature detected, micro-wrapped, 10-second trigger, target, our quarters. I didn't think. Trigger theta, now. Caro gave a single nod. I stepped backward, just enough to shift our formation out of central alignment. The explosion rolled through the station like a ruptured god. Dull red pulses flickered across the chamber. A section of the spire buckled in silence, distant but unmistakable. Even here the shockwave knocked delegates from their perches. Glass cracked, banners snapped, screams echoed. Guards surged forward, weapons drawn, panic in their eyes. One of them shouted the first accusation. It was the Terrans. I raised my hand. Not to surrender, to signal. The lights in the chamber dimmed, and outside the spire, the stars disappeared. The blackout wasn't total, just enough to tilt every head upward. Above us, The observation dome trembled with shifting light as 6 Terran stealth cruisers decloaked in perfect formation. No weapons drawn, no plasma trails, just silent, angular hulls blotting out the stars like judgment incarnate. The chamber froze. Guards hesitated mid-step. Some aliens screamed in panic. Others barked orders that looped back on their own comms. Caro spoke into the neural thread. All cruisers in position. Orbital hardlock achieved. They've got eyes on every vector. I raised 2 fingers to my temple. Protocol Theta. Engage full-spectrum cyber warfare. No kinetic deployment unless fired upon. Tanaka didn't wait. A dozen silent relays lit up across our implants as our command AI seeded every vulnerable subsystem on the spire. Turrets powered down. Internal cams looped. Defense AI went dark. Their best security protocols didn't slow us down. They didn't even notice the infection until it was over. We hadn't fired a shot. We didn't need to. Chaos cracked through the chamber like pressure under glass. Delegates argued in 5 languages. The Accord guards kept shouting conflicting orders while staring at our envoys, who now stood absolutely still. No longer diplomats, but deployed assets in tailored armor. Each envoy raised an open palm. Projected from the wrists, glowing blue glyphs spun into view. Terran authority override protocols. Accord sensors tried to process it, but their logic trees crashed under the layered encryption. Tanaka's voice hit the mesh again. Valari operatives marked. 1 fleeing through subdeck 3, engaging interception. I scanned the hall. Zilthar's expression had shifted from smug detachment to naked alarm. His thorax lattice blinked with active transmission. Time to drop the mask, I said. Let's show them how we do diplomacy. Inside the chamber, Zilthar moved, not toward the exit, toward me. His mandibles twitched in fury. You bring war to sacred halls? You brought the bomb, I said, cutting him off. We just turned it off before it could finish what you started. Around us, the rest of the Accord was still catching up. Delegates blinked at suspended datapads, trying to confirm what the rest of us already knew. The spire was compromised, their own systems were silent, and humanity was still not shooting. Tanaka pulsed another data burst into my feed. I lifted my chin. Projected. The chamber's holoscreen came to life. Footage rolled. A Velari tech agent placing the antimatter core. No mask, no doubt. Time-stamped, tagged, and traced. Then the second feed hit. Our drone's POV, tailing the same Velari operative through subdeck 3. The pursuit. The takedown. Clear, cold, legal. I faced the room. We didn't start this, but we're ending it. Guards flinched. Some powered down their weapons. Others kept them locked on, hands shaking. The Threx commander looked like he was waiting for someone to give him a reason to act. Caro stepped beside me, voice low and calm. Outer fleet's running silent. Defense satellites disabled. Station gravity's under our AI net. I nodded once. This is your warning, I said aloud, to the chamber. You're out of time. Stand down or stand aside. The moment the projection ended, the silence was radioactive. Every breath in the chamber seemed louder than the last. Moharun, the ancient arbiter, stirred at last. His bark-like voice rolled like tectonic plates beneath the floor. If the evidence holds, this summit was breached by a member of the Accord itself. I stepped forward, slow and deliberate, projecting through every mic, implant, and relay node still functioning. It was breached before we ever arrived. We came ready to talk. They came ready to kill. Zilthar hissed, mandibles wide, voice screeching in his native tongue. Tanaka translated in real time, a denial so desperate it almost sounded pathetic. Then I gave the signal. Release the seal, keep the locks. The spire's internal systems began rebooting. Life support fully restored. Holo displays resumed their full array, transits re-engaged, everything returned to normal. Except the security grid, which stayed in Terran-controlled safe mode. The Accord was back online, but we were still holding the keys. I turned toward the delegations, voice steady. We took control of your systems without a single kinetic round. We quarantined the threat. We protected the Council. You invited us to join. If that's not proof of our readiness, what is? Tanaka pinged again. All Velari assets confirmed, neutralized, no civilian casualties. I almost smiled. Almost. This was never about proving we belong, I said. It's about showing what we do when someone tries to erase us. I watched the Council react. Some species whispering, others stiff with shock. But the fear in the room was shifting. Not fear of us, but fear of what they almost missed, of what they'd grown too comfortable to see. This wasn't a coup. It was a rescue mission, and we'd just saved them from their own blind spots. The interrogation chamber was small, clinical, and stripped of pretense. We didn't bother with dramatics, just facts. Ziltha was suspended inside a Terran grav cage. No restraints, no violence. Just enforced stasis that let him hover a few centimeters off the deck, unable to move more than a twitch. Dignity intact. Which made the silence sting sharper. Tanaka played the footage again, this time in 3 simultaneous feeds. 1 drone, 1 security splice, 1 full biometric trace. The Velari operative had left a trail a rookie could follow. Axler thought didn't flinch. Caro leaned forward, arms crossed, voice low. You tried to detonate a diplomatic wing on neutral ground. Call it sabotage, call it assassination, but call it what it is, treason. Zilta finally spoke, his voice a low rasp. You think you've won something, but you've only exposed your hand. I stepped into the light. You're on. We exposed yours. His compound eyes locked on mine. You disrupted the equilibrium. The Accord is balance. Delicate, deliberate. And you are a fracture. Your kind advances too quickly, demands too much. You bend chaos into tools and call it progress. I didn't look away. We bend it because we've had to survive in it. While the Accord debated doctrine, we dodged extinction. You call that imbalance. We call it evolution. His exoskeleton shifted color, subtle, but the translation was clear. Fear. You think we're the architects of this sabotage? He said. We're just the blade. Caro stiffened. Then who holds the handle? Zilpha smiled, and it chilled the room more than any threat. You've seen shadows. You haven't seen the hand yet. But it sees you. Tanaka's hollow hood, a neural interface suit tailored for transneural signal data analysts, pinged in. An intercepted signal. Rerouted. And the final node wasn't Velari. It was something else. Something older. Tanaka's fingers moved faster than thought, feeding the intercepted code into our onboard decrypt stack. The signal had been triple bounced across dead relay chains, some dormant for over a century, none of them Velari. This wasn't a command packet, she said, her voice flat with disbelief. It was a ping, a heartbeat. They weren't talking to each other, they were checking in. I stepped beside her and looked at the feed. The signature was synthetic, non-biologic, built on post-quantum architecture we'd never seen deployed outside of black site AIs. The origin point? A node buried deep in the Accord's archival core, marked as decommissioned, sealed 300 years ago. Ziltha hadn't lied. The Valari weren't the architects. They were contractors. The knife, which begged the question, who sharpened it? I turned to Caro. Are we alone in this? He shook his head. Not anymore. We scrubbed every protocol channel we'd used since arrival. Tanaka's AI worked double time, flagging over 200 passive pings across Accord frequencies. Most were harmless. One wasn't. One had been listening since before we docked, mimicking diplomatic signals, hiding in the Accord ceremonial layer, a place no one ever looked because tradition said it was off limits. I tapped into the main thread. All units, audit every data signature received in the last 72 hours. Cross-examination against known Accord registry. Any anomalies go black room. No cross-network bleed. Tanaka leaned in, whispering now. If this is external, if someone else wanted that bomb to go off, they weren't just targeting us. They were targeting the Accord. And suddenly it clicked. This wasn't just about Earth, or about the Valari. This was about what came next. The Accord was fragile, bloated, and too slow to notice the cancer spreading in its archives. Someone wanted it to fall. We'd just kicked the door open early. I stood in the center of the Spire's grand chamber again. This time, alone. No delegation, just me, the truth, and a drone halo projecting everything across the stars. The delegates sat in tense silence, barely breathing. They weren't ready for this, but they were out of options. More Haroon inclined his massive bark-shelled head. You may speak. I nodded and took one step forward. This isn't a declaration. It's a revelation. The drone lenses shifted focus as I walked, each one beaming my image to hundreds of systems. My voice, my face, our proof. It would reach every Accord citizen, every dock worker, every farmer who still thought the Accord stood for safety. You were lied to. So were we. The Valari tried to frame us, tried to burn this summit to the deck. But they weren't working alone. The proof is in your archives, Hido, hiding where you stopped looking centuries ago. I let that sink in. One of the drones hovered lower, capturing the fire in my voice. You see us as dangerous. You should, because danger isn't chaos. Danger is clarity. When we see a threat, we don't stall, we act. The chamber remained still. A few delegates whispered. Others stared like statues. Then I hit them with the closer. We're not the problem. We're the warning system, and someone out there just failed to silence us. The feed ran for 12 minutes straight. Video evidence, intercepted comms, even the old Accord system logs we'd pulled from their own servers. Not a theory, not a hypothesis, a straight surgical cut down to the bone of the lie. When it ended, the chamber didn't move. Mol Haroon finally stood. For a moment, the sentries showed in his voice. This changes everything. Not enough, I replied. Not yet. The Valari delegation was silent. Ziltha had been detained, but his remaining aides sat frozen, eyes darting. They weren't planning an escape. They were recalculating. And they were coming up short. Caro stepped beside me, whispering through the mesh. Spire systems clear. No new intrusions, but our long-range taps showed chatter spike. Accord fleet elements are moving. How many? 18 vessels, mostly Threx. One Kolari dreadnought warming up its fusion cores. Posturing so far. Of course they were. They couldn't admit how deep they'd been infiltrated, so they defaulted to theater. Hold our position, I said. If they fire, they won't get a second shot. I turned back to the chamber, voice sharp now. You think this ends in a debate? It doesn't. Someone buried a trigger inside your house and hoped to watch humanity take the fall. We didn't just dodge the bullet. We caught it, traced the barrel, and found out your entire security doctrine is a fossil. The Gelth representative stood slowly, pale and amphibious. They blinked sideways. You demand too much. We haven't demanded anything, I said. We neutralized a threat. We restored control. And we're still here. Because leaving means it happens again, somewhere we don't see it coming. Silence. Then, finally, the Terran delegate, a psionic hybrid who hadn't moved since the explosion, opened its third eye. A slow psychic pulse rippled across the floor like a tide. You have brought clarity and danger? I nodded. We bring both. That's what makes us valuable. Behind me, the Terran fleet remained motionless in orbit, visible, present, untouched. I've seen fleets burn. I've seen orbital colonies vent atmosphere into vacuum because someone blinked first. This wasn't that. This was the moment before. The Terran cruisers held their formation, 6 blades in low orbit, each one cloaked until the second they weren't. Their targeting arrays remained dormant, weapons bays sealed. But they weren't hiding anymore. Their position was deliberate, obvious. Tanaka's voice hit the mesh, tight and low. All stations secure. Spire internal control stabilized. Their response fleet is rattling sabers but has no locks. Caro added. Fleet command confirms. If they fire, we erase them in under 90 seconds. I gave a short nod. And we still don't fire first. We always hated that doctrine, Caro muttered. Exactly why we keep it. In the chamber, I returned to the central podium and raised my voice again. To every Accord delegate watching this feed, I say this plainly. We're not here to dominate. We're here to prevent the kind of quiet rot that almost killed every one of you today. I gestured to the projection still looping behind me. Evidence. Sabotage. The intercepted signal pinging something older, deeper, hidden in their own foundations. You built this alliance on trust and ritual. We built our survival on action. One of those systems just proved it can hold under pressure. The Arbiter leaned forward, massive head bowed. And what would humanity demand in return? I didn't hesitate. Nothing. I let that hang. Nothing. Except acknowledgement. Not because we want validation, but because your enemies already know who we are. It's time your allies did too. The chamber didn't erupt. It shifted. Power never screams when it changes hands. It rearranges itself quietly, like a predator finding a more comfortable stance. The Takeri delegate closed their eyes, if you could call those obsidian slits eyes at all, and spoke with that haunting polyphonic resonance their species was famous for. You have upended protocol. You have revealed weaknesses we denied existed. I nodded once, and we did it without firing a shot. A moment passed. Then the Kalari ambassador, the same one who greeted us with veiled condescension at the Maglev dock, stepped forward. You disabled our station, hijacked its core systems, shamed this council. That was the polite version, I replied. The impolite version would have left this station a drifting tomb. We chose the former. Karu's voice hit the mesh quietly. Our AI confirms full system integrity. Accord backup nodes are back online. We're ready to hand it over. Do it, I sub-vocalized. With one exception. He nodded. Security grid remains under lock. We returned the keys to the Accord. Life support, comms transit, internal protocols. But the security framework? That stayed in standby, a locked reminder. A line in the sand. I turned back to the council. We're not occupying, we're not conquering. We're reminding you what happens when a civilization forgets how to defend itself. Then I smiled. Not smug, just a soldier remembering a lesson hard-earned. You talk about balance, about history. But history doesn't protect you. Readiness does. And right now, we're the only reason this chamber still exists. The projection behind me changed. Earth, Mars, Luna, Aut habitats, images of human resilience, chaotic innovation, hard-won unity, not perfection, just motion. Always forward. You called us dangerous. You were right. I walked off the podium without permission. We're dangerous to anyone who thought you were too slow to save. And we were just getting started. The aftermath should have felt like victory. It didn't. We had control. We had evidence. The Accord now understood that humanity wasn't something they could contain behind ritual and rhetoric. But that signal Tanaka traced, the one hidden beneath Accord protocols, that was still out there. She stood beside me in the debrief chamber, eyes flicking through 6-layered HUDs at once. Her neural interface glowed a steady amber, fast-processing anomalies even the fleet's AI hadn't flagged. Until now. There, she said. Packet string, hidden in an archival echo. It piggybacks off old Accord comms. Pre-standard formats. I frowned. Spoofed protocols? Worse, they're original. Accord never erased them, just buried them. And something still listening. She pushed the feed to the central display. A dark comms node lit up in real time, pulsing low-band data every 11 seconds. Not random, not stray code. A rhythm, a heartbeat. Caro leaned in. That's not Bellari. It's not anyone we know, Tanaka said. And it predates Terran contact by centuries, possibly millennia. The room chilled. We stared at the pulse as it blinked on the screen like an eye refusing to close. Whoever built this thing had buried it inside the Accord from the beginning. A parasite. Watching, waiting, letting the old powers rot from within. The Villari hadn't tried to assassinate us because they feared our rise. They were desperate, acting under orders, or fear. We were just a scalpel, I murmured. Something else was holding the scalpel, and it wasn't born in this chamber. Karu's voice dropped. Think they'll strike again? I looked at the pulse, still steady, still counting. They already did, I said. We just stopped the warm-up act. The Accord wasn't our enemy anymore. Something deeper was. And now, it knew we were watching. The node pulsed one final time, then vanished. Its signal collapsing into absolute silence, as though it had never existed in the first place. No traceroute, no termination command, no digital residue. Whatever had been listening on the other end had made the decision to cut the line on its own terms. Naka's eyes didn't move from her interface, locked on the void where data had lived only seconds before. It severed the connection deliberately, she said, her voice steady but edged with tension. Like it didn't want us following it. Caro crossed his arms, jaw tight. Or maybe it already got what it came for. My gut twisted at the implication. Either way, it blinked first. But before we could say more, another ping came through. This one soft, almost respectful, but impossible to ignore. A secondary channel, dormant until now, lit up across our command relay. The encryption was old, buried deep in Accord protocol, but the authentication markers weren't alien. They were Terran. That got my full attention. Tanaka was already decrypting before I could speak. The message appeared as a single line of text across the holoscreen. You weren't the only ones ready for this day. No signature. Just a statement. Calm, deliberate, and far more unsettling than a threat. The moment stretched until Tanaka's HUD blinked again. She expanded a hidden packet embedded inside the message. What unfolded wasn't sabotage. It was a gift. Encrypted data maps, dormant AI listening posts, relay schematics we'd never seen before, all pointing toward the same parasite network we'd just uncovered. These weren't Accord assets. They weren't current Terran fleet ops either. The architecture was older, leaner, designed for autonomous operation far beyond the solar perimeter. Someone had planned for this long before we arrived. Not a rogue faction, not a black cell, something buried beneath the surface of our own history. A safeguard left behind when the first Terran deep space initiatives went dark. Something that had watched the Accord's slow decay from the shadows and prepared for the moment someone needed to push back. Whoever they were, they just handed us the coordinates of the hidden hand that moved the Valari, and perhaps others. It wasn't a theory anymore. It was a hunt. I looked back at the Accord chamber, where the delegates now sat silent, not in fear, but in the long echo of realization. They had seen humanity survive sabotage, reclaim control of a sacred installation, and expose a deeper threat than any of them had dared name. I didn't speak for ceremony this time. I spoke because the galaxy had just shifted, and someone needed to define what came next. We came here prepared to defend ourselves. Now we offer to defend all of you. Not because we owe you, but because someone out there is counting on your silence. And that silence ends today. Behind me, our fleet projection bloomed, ship by ship, system by system, each vessel in position, engines idle, weapons cold, shields powered and angled to protect, not provoke. We hadn't come to conquer. We had come to hold the line others let rot. Mol Haroun stood once more. He bowed slowly, and this time not as a formality. One by one the other delegates followed, even those who had doubted us the loudest. Earth's banner unfurled at last, etched with stars and scars, its presence now undeniable. In the void beyond Tau Vallis, the hidden network might have vanished, for now. But this time, it wasn't watching us. This time, we were watching it.